Victoria Anthony. That's coming up next. Our next guest held some clinics at Liberty High School this past Saturday. She's the first, by the way, 4-time women's collegiate national champion. She placed 5th in the Worlds twice, 7-time USA World Team member, and now she's fighting in the MMA. And I just gave you the Cliff Note versions of her accomplishments. We bring on Victoria Anthony to the show. Victoria, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Let me start by just saying my profuse apology for last week when I didn't get you on the show. That was completely on me. I felt terrible about it. I talked to Paul about it and whatnot, but I just wanted to apologize to you personally over the air. I wanted to let you know that.
Oh, no problem. But thank you very much. I appreciate it. Yeah,
Sure.
No worries.
So I'm sort of curious because I want to make sure I'm correct on this. You're how old?
I'm 31.
That's what I thought you were. You're 31 years old. And, we're seeing more now in the norm of, girls wrestling here in California and even right here in Bakersfield. We have the state wrestling championships at Mechanics Bank Arena every year.
Yeah.
And now we have girls that are, it used to be like in Visalia and in Porterville, I think, and maybe Visalia. But then it was moved jointly with the boys, and the numbers have continued to grow and whatnot. I would imagine that was much different when you were a young girl. So I'm just wondering, how did you get started in this sport, and what was your inspiration?
Yeah, it's really incredible to see what's happened, particularly in California. We have such a big population, and just seeing like how so the sanctioning of girls wrestling happened after I graduated high school. I graduated in 2009. I think it was sanctioned in California in 2010, and then since then it's just been skyrocketing in numbers. But for me, I started with the Japanese martial art, judo, and judo is also an Olympic sport. And I did that from when I was 6 years old till I was 14, and then I got injured right before I was going into high school. And a lot of judo players will join their high school wrestling teams when they get to high school because the sports are so similar, and high schools don't have judo teams. But for me, I didn't want to at all. My parents suggested it, but I was like, no, thank you, because I don't want to join the boys wrestling team. And I actually just ended up seeing a demonstration because my eventual wrestling coach, he was trying to recruit kids out of the PE classes. And I saw it, and I think like my friend forced me to join the demonstration. And from that point, I was like, okay, this will get me out of PE, so I'm going to do it. That was pretty much the start.
Okay, so it got you out of PE, but when were you hooked? When did you decide, yeah, I like this?
From the beginning, I'm just the type of person that whatever I start, if I decide I'm going to do it, that means I'm going to keep doing it. Like the initial decision was a commitment, it really was just a transfer of my goal from judo to wrestling. My goal in judo was to be an Olympian, so that goal just changed over to wrestling.
So I'm sure Liberty is one of many stops that you make, but you came to Bakersfield. You held some clinics at Liberty High School to grow the game. I saw some boys in those photo shots as well. Talk a little bit about your vision, your mission when you come to places like Bakersfield and you share your experience and obviously your knowledge with the young wrestlers.
Yeah, it's really such an amazing treat and joy for me because my Bakersfield trip was wedged in between a trip to Paris on the weekend, and then now I'm headed to London next week. And this is all because of wrestling. This is because of the skills, the tenacity, the work power that I developed in the sport of wrestling. And all those things are things that any young kid can go develop, and then they can live whatever type of life they want to because of what wrestling gifts you through how difficult it is and what a grind it is every single day. And really, these kids, anyone that decides to join the wrestling team, will be prepared for whatever they want to do the rest of their lives. And I think that's really important for young kids and even parents to understand in the present day and age, because our society is just very different from what it once was,
Yeah.
So I really like what wrestling can give to people, especially in current times.
When you said Paris there for a moment, I thought, there is a Paris, California, and I go, then you said London. I said, okay, she meant the one in France.
Yeah, and it's just like wrestling has allowed me to travel to over 50 countries.
Wow.
My entire income is based on wrestling and social media because of wrestling. The connections and contacts I've made, I have friends. I went to visit a friend in France. I have friends all over the world because of this sport. And it's crazy. It starts in high school wrestling gyms in Bakersfield, this whole path. Jake Farner, Olympic champion. Many have walked the path. And I just like to go around and introduce that to younger kids thinking about, like, should I commit to this thing, and just show them what's possible.
Yeah. I've said this many times on my show, and not when I just have wrestlers on, just as a sportscaster here in town, and I watch a lot of different sports at the high school level and the college level too with our university here. But there are two sports that I have immense just respect for when it comes to work ethic. One is swimming, because of the hours and the time they put in, and at the ungodly hours of like 5 in the morning. And I see these people swimming, and they just go all day long. And the other is wrestling, because if you've never been in a wrestling room, you don't know the grind, and you don't know, you just don't understand the passion and everything that it takes to actually finally get on the mat to compete, what goes on behind closed doors. Is it a hard sell to get kids to make a commitment to a sport that is that grueling, or is it there's a certain DNA that are built in certain people that just love that?
Yeah, you know what? I don't even think it's a DNA thing. Like, it's kind of funny because you said, when did you decide you liked it? I answered from the beginning, but I actually never really liked it. That's just the type of sport that wrestling is. Like, my whole high school career, I was uncomfortable. It was hard. And it wasn't that I just was so in love with it. It just, but in a weird way I was. It's difficult to explain. But I think that everyone's drawn to the sport for different reasons. Maybe your friends are doing it. That's a good enough reason. Or, maybe you want to be an Olympian like myself. That was the reason. Or, there's so many reasons. I met one girl at a clinic recently, and her dad was telling me, when she joined the wrestling team, we didn't think she stood a chance because she's so unathletic, but she just found her way in this sport. And I think that's what it also lends itself to, is you don't need to be anything. You can come as you are. You don't need any specific amount of athleticism, height, speed, agility. Every style is welcome and can find its way in wrestling. I think that's one of the sell points, and really just the success that I think American wrestlers are having right now. The World Championships are going on currently, and I think the U.S. women's wrestling team just added their 4th or 5th finalist into the world finals. One girl won the world today, and for young girls to see that and see Americans having that type of success, I think that's really inspiring as well.
When you have clinics like you did at Liberty High School, do you find the young girls that you come across, do they feel still at the awkward stage? It was maybe awkward because you were the only girl, and a bunch of guys, but that's not the case anymore. And I'm just wondering, have times changed a lot for girls in terms of just the way they feel before they even hit the mat?
Right. I think it's a little bit of both. I've seen it both ways where, girls are so comfortable. They come with their squad of 4 or 5, maybe 10 other girls from their school, and they're comfortable, and they're a team, and they're all working together and really working towards a common goal. And then I've seen other girls more like myself, and I think it was partly that I joined a boys wrestling team, but it was partly just who I was at the awkward age of 14 years old, just wanting to fit in, and girls wrestling still isn't that common. It's not the same feeling as, a girl telling you she plays soccer or softball. It's still a surprise to most people. And so with that, I think it's just a time in adolescence where young girls and young boys are just figuring out who they are and how to just stand firmly in the world, So I've seen that too. And for me, that's even I resonate with that so much. So I can often speak to that, or I'll speak to them separately, and I just feel them.
Yeah. Well, we know where your career is taking you, but how did that high school experience end up for you? I mean, were there some beatdowns in there, or did you do fairly well? How did it go for you?
Yeah, I did do fairly well. So my sophomore through senior year, I wrestled 103 varsity for my high school boys team, and I won the league title all 3 of those years. And then I made it to boys masters my sophomore year, but didn't place. And then I actually won boys CIF. I believe I'm the first girl to ever win boys CIF, and I might be the only in the southern section. And then I made it to masters, and I didn't make it to state.
Wow,
that was that path.
Oh, that is impressive. So you got the MMA thing going right now. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's so fun for me. It's just the skill set of wrestling, again, has just set me up for the rest of my life. It's so valuable in MMA. I feel like I have, this golden tablet of information that no one else can just go get. You know, if an MMA fighter, they can't go accumulate 14 years of wrestling experience. It's just impossible, you know. So I really feel equipped and excited because of the skill set. And then for me, it's like, okay, I did judo for 10 years, then I was kind of bored and switched to wrestling. And then wrestling for 15, 16 years, kind of bored. And now it's a new frontier. And for me, that's just like what my life is predicated on, is just finding newness and experiencing it and enjoying it. So it's really, really fun for me to have to learn every single skill set and also to defend every skill set. And the stakes are so high that makes it fun. I like the sport of MMA a lot.
Well, if you get an opponent to the ground, they're in trouble. I know that. So,
yes.
So you know, it's funny. I was listening to you, Victoria, and when we talked about when you were young and wrestling, you didn't use the word fun, but MMA, that was the first word out of your mouth.
Isn't that funny? That is so hilarious. Good to hear. You know, it's funny you say that just because I have a lot of friends that walked the path in mixed martial arts before me. Henry Cejudo is one of my close friends and a mentor to me. He's a 2-belt holder in the UFC, and he's an Olympic champion. And before I decided to fight, he would just say, like, Victoria, MMA is so much easier than wrestling. I was like, what are you talking about? And I have other friends in the UFC that told me that as well. I was like, you guys are crazy. You end up bloodied and all these other things. And now that have started my career in MMA, I have one fight under my belt, and that's what I train every day. They're right. It's so much easier than training for wrestling. Wrestling's so hard.
I guess it's easier if you're not on the. It's easier if you're not on the business end of a punch or two, right? I mean,
that too. You can get out of the way.
Yeah. So where are you off to next? I mean, you came to Bakersfield. You did the Paris and London thing. Where else are you going?
Yeah, London is next. So I'm leaving
London's
next weekend. Yeah, and a quick trip to Denver, Colorado in between for some other stuff. And then I'll go to London and then fly to Liverpool to train with the fighter Molly McCann, who's on her rise right now. Yeah, and she happens to be fighting a girl that has a good inside trip, which is my number one scoring technique in wrestling. So she asked me if I could come out. And I'll probably do some seminars out that way as well, probably more for the jiu-jitsu community. And just train and keep training. And then I'm intending to fight in December and January. It's at the Liberty of organizations, if they should make the dates.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
All right. So finally, you know, you do not sound like someone in the time that I've been talking to you that would give a generic message to anybody. It sounds like you got a lot of passion about what you've done and what you do. So what is your message when you come across young athletes? Because they're going to ask a ton of questions. In fact, I'm curious, what's the question you get the most, and what is the message that you really want to send to young athletes?
I think the message that is most important to me is just be your organic, authentic self, because that is who you're meant to be in the world and how you're meant to be despite anything that might be going on around you. And that's really what has led to me living this life that I live today. Like, it wasn't normal per the social standard at my school to join the boys wrestling team, but I just felt like something in my heart was like, this is what you should be doing. So I did it, you know? And I think there's a lot of things that young kids deal with like that. Like, is it going to be cool with my friend group or people I don't even know? You know, with social media, I think there's a lot of concern about what other people think. And just to cast all that out and to cast that aside and ask yourself, like, what do you want for yourself and what makes you feel alive and inspired and like you want to keep doing it every day. So that's probably the biggest message.
And what is the question you usually get the most?
Honestly, people ask me who inspired me more often than not, but it's really always a kind of a anticlimactic answer because I was never a fan of wrestling. I didn't grow up in a family of wrestlers. My family didn't know anything about wrestling. And really, since I was a little girl, like 6 years old, all I ever wanted to be was a ninja. And there were just certain martial arts movies that inspired me. And I wanted to live like these martial artists that, in the movies at least, you know, they could fight anybody, they could do whatever they wanted, and they traveled all over the world and getting into fights. So that's pretty much what I'm doing now.
Okay. So my last question to you, Victoria, since you said you started judo at 6, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did you ever dress as a ninja for Halloween?
Oh, I believe I did. My memory is not very good, but
Okay.
I'm almost positive. Yeah. And I was just always being a ninja in my own home.
Okay.
But my poor dad, he was my subject for most of it. A lot of karate chopping when I never did karate.
Okay.
Hey, Victoria, this is Hop. I'm Greg's producer. You said you like martial arts films. Are you a fan of the movie Master of the Flying Guillotine?
Ooh, I haven't seen it, so
You
not yet.
need that. It is the king of all martial arts films. I'm telling you.
Ooh. Okay, I'm ready.
It's a really old one, and you will see its influence on video games and other martial arts films throughout ever. But it's called Master of the Flying Guillotine.
I can't wait. I'll probably watch it tonight. Thank you very much.
When I went to high school in the Philippines, it was all Bruce Lee movies is what I used to see a lot of.
You went to high school in the Philippines? That sounds
Yeah, I did. You ever been to the Philippines?
I have. I went once, just on my own. It was so fun. I loved it so much.
Yeah. I was a military brat, so we were at Subic Bay Naval Base. I was hanging out there. So anyway, Victoria, it was a pleasure talking to you. Have safe travels wherever you go, and continued success as you get ready for your next fight in MMA.
Thank you so much. I'd love to give a quick shout out to Fresco Mexican Grill. They came with unlimited Mexican food and supported our clinic by providing catering, and the platters were so good, like so good. And I personally have my own stomach condition going on right now, and they had 2 kettle bowls for me, which I thought was really awesome that they provided. Just really healthy and clean options, and I'm really particular about how I eat.
Right.
I'm a professional athlete all my life, and the bowl was perfect. It didn't upset my stomach, and so big shout out to Fresco, and thank you guys so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Victoria, you bet. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, thank you.
All right, you bet. That's Victoria Anthony. Wow, impressive. This is the Greg Kerr Show, 1230 a.m., 101.1 FM, ESPN Sports.